I was pretty excited when I heard the announcement of Season 2 of Devil is a Part-Timer, but the more I looked into it, the more my excitement went downhill, especially when I saw it was from a new studio, and with it just being so long after the first season, it was inevitably going to be quite a step down, but I was still a bit hopeful, and the first few episodes were actually pretty decent. It wasn't the best show, but it was enjoyable at least. And then it went downhill extremely quick. Episode 4 is basically where everything just starts being awful, specifically with the animation, and just in general, the animation is extremely sloppy. The characters just completely change between scenes. The shading doesn't make sense in half of them. A lot of the proportions don't make sense, and the expressions are iffy at best half of the time. It's just extremely inconsistent with how things are animated, and it's very jarring for me personally to watch and enjoy, and I was constantly taken out of the story every time I noticed a mistake that was very prominent, which happened quite often. But I mean, if you can look past the animation errors and just how everything looked in general, you would at least get a lot of filler content, because that's basically what this show has turned into. The entirety of the season is just filler. It starts off pretty strong with Alice Ramis showing up, which is this little child thing that just magically appears and claims that Mao and Emilia are its parents, which does make for a cute family dynamic that I really enjoyed at first. But after the initial introduction and little family bonding bit, it became very stale and honestly didn't really add a whole lot to the story. Like, it starts off seeming like it's going to be a very big part of the story, where people are constantly trying to get her specifically, but then it just ignores that and turns her into a sword, and then it just kind of fizzles out into nothing. But then again, I was so bored with the entire story that I probably missed out on half of the plot. But then they just end up going on a bunch of filler adventures that seem like tourism hotspot destination advertisements, which is cool and all, but I would much rather watch a show that is more dedicated to that, kind of like how Sakura Quest was. That was actually really good for the whole tourism-y stuff. But it's extremely out of place in a story about a demon that is isekai'd into our world. I don't think it makes a whole lot of sense having the characters all go on these vacation-esque activities when nothing is really being added to the story from any of it. Like, they're not really going on any crazy arc that builds character development or anything. They're just going off and doing activities that are immediately forgotten as they go off and do more activities. Like, it doesn't really add to anything. There is a bit where there's some plot involved with, like, the demon army was invading type thing, but that was immediately brushed off and they were sent back to their world. And I don't think anything really came from it except Emilia getting like a gem that I guess is supposed to be some big deal, but it didn't really add anything to the story, and it's just kind of an extra thing that gets brought up occasionally to remind you that, hey, there is some story here at least. But like, the actual plot takes up such a small percentage of the show at this point that it's just extremely easy to forget anything that has happened in the show because of all of this mind-numbingly boring filler type content. I keep watching hoping that it's going to pick up pace or something's gonna happen that's gonna tie it all together, but for the most part it just doesn't. It doesn't feel like it's going anywhere at all. And I think that's what annoys me the most about this show, is that I've been watching it expecting something to change, but for the most part, it just feels like a complete waste of time with zero payoff. And unless the final episode can completely change my opinion about the show, I really think this is one of the worst sequels I've ever seen. I don't even know if any of this video actually makes sense, but when Tokyo Ghoul came out with Season 3 and 4, which covered the events of Ri, it was completely different in the sense of it was poorly paced and just everything was kind of mismatched, and it didn't really make a whole lot of sense story-wise because they shoved so much into such a little space. And I can ramble forever about that because Tokyo Ghoul was one of my favorite shows of all time, still is to this day, but Season 3 and 4 completely ruined any actual love I have for the anime itself. The manga's still amazing. I love it. And I've rewatched Season 1 and Route A like 7,000 times at this point, but looking back at that, I've only rewatched the 3rd and 4th season once so far, and it's a lot better the more you watch it, but it still sucks. Whereas in this case, I don't think I would ever want to watch this a second time. It's just that there's no like life in it, and it feels boring. I don't know how else to describe it. Nothing that has happened in this season has even remotely made me want to keep watching, except for the initial few episodes, where it was a fresh new character and they were introducing parts of the story. But then it just tries shoving so much random stuff that doesn't matter to any plot point. At least in season 1, it felt like everything was leading up to something or going somewhere. This just feels like a bunch of one-off mini arcs that are shoved together just because they didn't know what else to put there. But also in that regard, the characters in season 1 were all brand new, so we got to learn their personalities and what they're actually like. Whereas in the 2nd season, they haven't really changed from that moment. So there's still those characters that we already know, and there's very little, if any, change, apart from them acting more like a family now. And I don't really think that's enough to justify this 2nd season. I think in writing it's very important for your characters to continuously grow and be forced in situations where they have to grow. So when there's this minimal character growth in the show, I think that it falls extremely flat to me, and it just doesn't make for a compelling story. Like, I get that it's supposed to be a parody and it's supposed to be funny and comedic, which aren't really my favorite things in the world, but at the same time, like, you want to have a good story backing it, so you can have those comedic moments and make things enjoyable and funny. But when every couple episodes they're going to an amusement park or a beach or a farm, like, it's really hard to develop an actual story that's continuously growing with the characters. Because every single thing they do feels like it doesn't actually connect whatsoever, apart from it happened to these characters, where they didn't really change at all. I don't know, this just feels like one of the worst sequels I have ever seen, and I kept watching each episode just with the hopes that it might get better, but it never did. But that's not to say that the show didn't have its moments. There's a few good things that I actually enjoyed in the show, but those moments were muddied by the bad. But it just continued down the same route of these boring little side quests that didn't really add to anything. And now I'm really worried that Thousand Year Blood War is going to end up like this, and actually I don't really think it will. I think that'll be phenomenal, and I'm really hyped for that. But now it's going to be in the back of my mind that all of these sequels are just going to be downhill piles of garbage. But it's probably not going to stop me from watching another sequel if it comes out. Hopefully this rant was somewhat enjoyable. Thanks for watching.